Peer pressure is like a tsunami in the lives of many of our teenagers. My guest is convinced that friends still have the power to save the lives of those they hang out with if they're willing to speak up. Penny Whips has been reaching out to good kids living dangerously since the tragic death of her youngest son, Kyle, in 2008. It's a pleasure to welcome Penny from Sisters, Oregon. And the surprise is you had been here as a literary person, a publicist with guests that you brought to our program. And I think it was shortly after a visit that your world fell apart.
Yeah, I got a call on September 7th at 1:30 in the morning from my daughter, and she wanted to make sure, was someone with me, was I alone? And I was alone. I was living in Atlanta at the time, and she said, "Mom, Kyle's dead." And I, immediately you go into shock, and I said, "I'm sorry, what did you say?" She said, "He's dead." And I said, "Well, was he in a car accident?" And she said, "No, Mom, I'm really sorry. He died of a heroin overdose." So very shocked. I mean, I actually said, "That's not true. Kyle would not have done that. He was scared of that kind of thing." And so she said, "No, Mom, it's true. He died of a heroin overdose."
Almost 22?
23 days short of his 22nd birthday.
We have the 911 call. Let's go to that now.
911.
Hi, a friend of ours, we think overdosed, and we need an ambulance at an address in Southeast Portland.
Okay, so you're not there with him right now?
I'm not with him. I actually haven't even seen him. They just gave me the phone and said to call. Do you want to talk to someone that can, go through procedures with you or something?
Yeah, I want to talk to someone that knows what's going on. So.
Okay. Just a second.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, where are we going to?
6705 Southeast 77th.
Where are you right now?
I am standing in the basement with a kid that has a purple face that I do not believe has a pulse or...
Okay, how old is this kid?
This kid is probably 22.
And he's unconscious and not breathing?
I don't believe that he is breathing at this point. I am making the assumption that he did heroin last night. I can't verify that. I wasn't here at the time.
All right. I've got some help started out there right now, some police and an ambulance. Are you willing to do pre-arrivals with me?
I'm not aware of what pre-arrival is.
Well, are you willing to do some efforts to get him breathing again while the crews are coming out there?
I don't believe that that's an option for this person right now. I don't.
Okay, and so what's making you think that? Are his limbs stiff or what?
Yes. He is stiff, he is cold as ice, he has a purple face, he has purple in his chest, he's not responding to anything. I know enough about CPR to know that I don't believe he's responding in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
Penny, it's still devastating. But the calm here, the lack of engagement, there's no intensity in these moments.
It was very shocking. The first time I heard it, I was angry because I was like, why aren't you down there trying to resuscitate him? And it was almost like, get the police here, get him out of here quick. And so they don't want to be involved, just void of emotion. It was very shocking the first time I heard it. I mean, it's still shocking.
There are so many things about this story that will be a surprise to you. These aren't bad kids. These aren't at-risk kids. 3 out of 4 are believers in Christ.
These are kids that if you were to line them up in a line of students, you would look at them and they would not be the ones you would pick for a child at risk. These were A students. One of the boys there was a valedictorian. They're top athletes, musicians. And this is the new trend, is that they're making choices of recreational use of things that are killing kids.
And what was being used here was
it was black tar heroin.
Cheap form of heroin.
Yes, it's called black tar heroin. It is the cheapest form of heroin, and it's the most deadly because when you buy it, you don't know if it's 4% proof or 90% proof. And I had talked to the coroner because I wanted to know, was my son using, was he an addict? And they said that they had only found 3 puncture wounds on his arm. There were no old needle marks. And that had he been a habitual user, he would not have died because his body would have built up a resistance. But the amount of heroin and the purity of it just killed him. He couldn't handle it.
You spoke 5 times to students in the week following your son's passing.
Yeah, actually, I spoke at the memorial service, I spoke at a church, and then I spoke 3 times at once at the high school with the whole student body, and then twice with middle school students. And I called up the principal. Now, this is a really small town, and he knows me and knows my kids. And
This is in Sisters?
yes, Sisters, Oregon. And I called him and I said, Bob, if you want me to come, I'll come talk to the kids. And he was flabbergasted. He said, how can you do that? And I said, well, I think God has me in this protective bubble. And I believe I could do it. And I think it's really important, you know, to talk to these kids about, first of all, about good kids living dangerously and about breaking the code of silence surrounding their friends' risky behavior. So I did. I did speak 5 times. Yeah.
This was one of the disturbing things, is that every friend with Kyle was aware of abnormal behavior.
Yes,
Something wasn't right.
We met with the students. They asked to meet with the family. So my son and daughter, my daughter-in-law, Kyle's mentor, and our pastor met with these students. There were 3 out of the 4 that were there. And I was shocked that they knew something was off. In fact, one of his friends took me to lunch a couple of days after we buried Kyle, and he said, Penny, I knew in my gut I was supposed to say something. But I just didn't want Kyle to get mad at me, because he and Kyle had a confrontation about 6 months before that. And Kyle, he's a bit of he could be a bit of a stinker, stubborn and all that. And his best friend disagreed with him. And so he gave him such a hard time. He said, I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to do that again. So he said, I'll just let him sleep it off. And then in the morning, I'm going to talk to him. He thought maybe I'll talk to him. And so his friend that was with him went in to wake up Kyle, and he didn't wake up. And then, of course, they called the 911, and Kyle was dead, and he was devastated. He just said that's a decision I'll regret for the rest of my life.
Every day of his life. This is a chilling logo, but I think it's going to be achieving its purpose. And you see, the J is one eye, and the times sign is the other eye. Just one time. Deadly. What other things are you addressing when you talk to students about what they're messing with?
Yeah. I define dangerous living as anything that can harm you or your friend. So it could be huffing, and that's starting out in grade school. Kids are getting household cleaners and huffing them, and they're deadly.
I left the can offset with the stuff they blow the dust off your computer with.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's like cutting. I would even say things like texting while you're driving is dangerous living. Obviously, any kind of drug. Now, there is the thought that marijuana is not that bad for you. And I'm not talking about medical use, whatever that is, but I'm talking about kids that are starting out with a little pot and maybe drinking alcohol once in a while. I really believe, like Kyle did, do some recreational use of things in high school, and we had talked about them. There were consequences. But I think the fact that he did that and nothing ever happened, and there's this invincibility in our students.
Well, we know that part of their brain isn't developed.
They're invincible. And so I really believe that that's why it really led it to the door of something that was more extreme.
You have such a background in nurturing children, special education teacher. Missions trips to places like Mexico and Uganda. That part of your heart must have just kicked in. I mean, I'm sure nobody can imagine it being in your position in this devastating loss, having anything together to go and speak to anyone.
Yeah.
And you spoke to 5 assemblies.
Yeah,
in that first week.
Well, I love kids, and I've always had kids in my home. I've mentored young girls, and these boys knew Kyle since he was in, I think, 5th or 6th grade. So these kids had raided my refrigerator as many times as Kyle did. So I love these guys. They're like my sons, and so I think more than anything, it was so shocking that people knew. And no one said anything. I think that's what really kicked me into,
Somebody's got to say something.
Yeah, and if I'm willing to share my heartbreak and my story, maybe it will help other kids to make better choices, or even to open up communication with parents in a totally different dialogue.
This has had such a wide, ongoing ripple. I was amazed that they were able to trace the source of this heroin, and the supplier was arrested.
Yes, the detectives were amazing. They got on it right away, and they basically told the boys that were, there were two boys that one had brought the heroin in, and the other boy had done the heroin with Kyle, and they basically said, we're going to put a tap on your phone, or there's going to be some consequences if you don't let us, basically. So they put a tap on the phone, and they were able to get the street dealer, so the boy that sold them the heroin, and then the street dealer turned on what they call like a street trafficker at a street level. And he was an illegal alien from Honduras. He has children in Honduras. He was feeding his family.
One of the articles said he was moved to tears.
Oh, he did. When I was talking to the judge, I read my letter in front of the court, and he wept. In fact, he even said, when he got a chance to talk to the court, he basically said, I will take whatever punishment you give me. I deserve this. And he said, when I get out of prison and go back to Honduras, I'm going to talk in schools and churches to talk to kids about my story so they don't make this choice. And the thought of him, and he wasn't a hardened criminal, this was someone probably that was trying to feed his family. And there's compassion there. Like when he started talking about his children, it was hard. I had tears, because he has a family now that's without their dad, So I was interviewed by the Oregonian after the sentence hearing, and he said, so would you ever even, go talk to him, or if he came out of it after the
Would you go talk to him?
Yes, or if he came after, would you want to do presentations in school with him? And I said, sure.
With him?
If spending 6 years in federal prison was really enough of a deterrent to change, so he could go home and be a great dad and a husband and really
get a proper
be
job.
Effective to his community, I would, because it's Kyle made the choice. He didn't even meet Kyle. This guy never even knew Kyle. He just didn't. So he made a choice, and Kyle made a choice, and it ended in death. And so, it's I think if you're willing to take your pain and reach out, then God can do something amazing with it. So
we are certainly seeing that in this story. We have a photograph of your team.
Yes.
And I understand that Tory Sharp, the chairman of Just One Time, is not just a cousin, but he was a mentor
to Kyle.
Yeah.
He's an amazing man.
And you've got a lot of close connections here in this.
There's a lot of family on the team. We started out with 12 members, but with injuries, because it's called the Hood to Coast race, and they call it the mother of all relays.
Say that again. The
Hood to Coast. So you start at Mount Hood. It's 196 miles.
Oh.
And it's a relay race with 12 members, and you end up at Seaside at the beach in the Oregon coast. And we ran for about 36 hours. Each team member runs 3 legs. And I'm not a runner, so you bet I got a trainer. And they worked hard on me, and it probably was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was amazing. So we had 6 family members. We had one of my nieces flew home from Japan. She teaches in Japan to run. And I had a nephew and a niece come from Canada to come down and run. So we had 6 family members, 6 non-family members, and we all ran to raise awareness for Just One Time.
God brings blessings out of brokenness.
Yes, he does.
Wondrous ways. What has this meant for the siblings and for the friends who were there?
One of the young men that was there, in fact, the one that took me out to lunch and talked about his decision, his choice not to talk to Kyle, he has done a video for us called Regrets of a Friend, and it's amazing, where he talks to students. I think I have friends that Kyle grew up with come up to me and say, Penny, we heard what you said at the memorial service. I have students that say, I heard what you said at school. We're making different choices. So that's been exciting. As far as his siblings, it's devastating. It's 28 months and 8 days today. So it's still very, very new. And I think what I've learned, grieving is a process. It's not you don't have 2 months here, 2 months here. It's just a lifetime of working through your pain. And I tell people, for me, grief is kind of like riding a surfboard in the ocean. Some days are beautiful and you're enjoying the surf and the ride, and then other days you fall off and you hang on for dear life, and then there's days where you crash and burn. And so for me, grief is unexpected because I've never experienced anything like this. And so every day is new, and all three of those scenarios can be in one day or they can be months apart. So it was devastating. Kyle was bigger than life. He walked into a room and just took up a lot of space. So that space is empty, and we're just trying to find, like Carol talks about, a new normal. Carol Kent in her book
has been a great encourager
yes,
for you.
she has. She's a dear friend. Her and Jean are just, they're like family. And you know, it's that new normal, trying to figure it out, and we're not there yet. Our holidays still, we haven't found our new normal yet. It's just because we tried to do it the same way the first year after Kyle passed away, and it, oh boy, that was
agony.
Brutal. Yeah. So it's about starting new experiences and new things so that you can keep moving through. But
this blindsided you. You
Sure.
didn't see it
Yeah.
coming. And I know there are parents watching who are feeling out of the loop and maybe a little naive but fearful about everything their kids might be up to. Do you have a word of counsel, apart from praying?
you know, I think your home needs to be a safe environment for your kids to be honest. We tend to overreact or freak out if they say, I have a friend, or maybe it's them they're talking about, but they're saying it's their friend. I think we need to be listeners and encouragers. And what I tell the students when I speak to them in schools is this is not about getting your friends in trouble. This is about saying, I'm willing to risk you being angry at me for a period of a time in order to get you help. And if the parents can really create a safe place and listen and not overreact, but really talk about getting help for their friends or help for them versus, okay, we're calling the cops, or you know, whatever. It's really about getting help and for parents to have a safe place where their kids can communicate.
Penny, thank you so much for your courage
Thank you for having me.
and for igniting all our hearts on this theme today. Maybe you're fearful and would just like some prayer right now for someone on your heart. Our prayer lines are always available.